we've got a theme, which we do on Sunday nights. We have a theme to try and tie the talks together. And the current theme is called The Way to the Beyond for the Benefit of All, the Bodhisattva Ideal. So what we're looking at is a particular path, a particular presentation of the Buddhist path called the Bodhisattva path. And the Bodhisattva is a term that means a being who is, it really emphasises the altruistic aspect of Buddhism, the compassion aspect of Buddhism, as well as wisdom, that Buddhists are practicing for other people as well as for themselves. So, and the term literally means somebody who is practicing to gain enlightenment. So Bodhi means awakening, Sattva means person, so it's basically an enlightenment person. But the spirit behind it is that all of their energies are focused towards practicing for themselves as well as for other people. And we're looking at the path of the Bodhisattva in more detail. So there's these 10 aspects of the path of the Bodhisattva, the way of practicing in this way as a Bodhisattva. And they're called the 10 paramitas, or the 10 perfections. And paramitar can be translated as the way to the beyond, which is why we've got this name for our theme, the way to the beyond. And you could say it's a way, these 10 different ways of going beyond our kind of limited focus on ourself, on kind of selfishness. It's a way of going beyond a limited idea of ourselves, a way of going beyond all of that to a place of wisdom and compassion. So that's, in a nutshell, the theme. And we're part way through it. We just started last week on looking at the paramitar of energy, or virya paramitar. And Satyajoti gave a great talk last week, just setting the context and explaining about virya, what energy means in Buddhist terms. And what she was saying was that it specifically means energy directed in pursuit of what is wholesome, what is good. So we've got lots of energy. There's no shortage of energy. We're beings made up of energy. But what we're looking to do as part of the Bodhisattva path and the Buddhist path is to redirect our energy, to harness our energy, and to harness it in pursuit of what is wholesome, what is good, what is going to be beneficial to us and to other people. And she introduced 2 terms last week, which we're looking at more this evening. So what you could say is that, I'll refer to these terms in a second. What you could say is we very much driven by desire. Human beings are very much driven by desire. In a sense, we do what we want to do. And so the Buddhist tradition has 2 terms for this. We've got the word chanda, which means desire, hunger. And we've got 2 types of desire. There's dharma chanda, desire for what is wholesome, what is going to liberate us, what is best for us and for other people. And kama chanda, which is kind of a desire for what is comfortable, what is familiar, what is habitual, for kind of short-term sense pleasures to kind of distract ourselves, you could say. So what we're looking to do is on the Buddhist path, you can see the Buddhist path in terms of moving from Kama Chanda towards Dharma Chanda. And hopefully you remember a metaphor we use on the intermediate course about there being a horse and a rider. We describe ourselves as though our head and our heart, our intellect and our emotions have become disconnected. And it's as though we are the intellect, we are the rider of the horse, and the horse is our deeper drives, our emotions, our volitions. And we might have very high ideals about what we'd like to do with our lives, what aspirations we set for ourselves. Actually, what we might find ourselves is doing something completely different in a way. We'll do whatever the horse wants to do. So the rider might think, I'm going to go off in this direction towards enlightenment, and the horse thinks, I'm going to go this direction towards this nice warm stable or this attractive horse over there. So in a sense, we're driven by deeper desires, you could say, emotional depths, deeper energies. And what we need to do is to harness those deeper energies, and we need to get the horse and the rider going in the same direction. Last week, Satyajoti used another image about, you could say, in the depths of our being, it's as though there's lots of fantastic characters with loads of amazing qualities. And they could be serving us, we could be using all these different qualities of these fantastic characters. So there might be wizards, warrioresses down there, great kings and queens down there in this kind of feasting hall. But so they've all just gone to sleep and they're covered in cobwebs. And it's because we are in a way, they only wake up when we're doing something that is challenging and inspiring and interesting to them. So I find both those images really helpful, the idea of the horse and the rider and this kind of archetypal feasting hall in our depths. And what we're looking at this evening is how we stir those energies, how we awaken that energy we've got within us and harness it. How do we get that energy of the horse or these characters, these qualities in the depths and get it behind our Dharma practice? Or conversely, if we're, how do we work with that other type of energy, the energy that is habitual, that is going towards sense pleasure and distractions? How do we transform that? How do we work with that and transform it into Dharma Chanda, energy in pursuit of the good? So we're going to be hearing 3 more personal talks around those kind of areas in different kind of aspects, but around working with energy, working with our depths. How do we harness our energies? So we're going to hear from, first of all, Moksatara, and then from myself, and then from Maitridasa. And each of us are going to just talk about our own practice in a way. How do we work with energy? How do we work with our own energy? How do we become inspired to practice? How do we work with this Karma Chanda? How do we cultivate Dharma Chanda? So we'll be looking at different aspects of those through these 3 personal talks. And first of all, it'll be Moksatara.
Okay, I'm going to talk about listening to music and how important listening to music has been for me in my life and in my practice more recently. So, when I say music, I mean popular music. So my family listened to a lot of music when I was growing up. Not really classical music, just a wide range of different kind of rock and roll, jazz, folk music. And that was a really important part of my childhood. So the music was very, very loud quite often. We'd be dancing around. When we went on really long car journeys, we had this box of tapes, and we'd all take it in turns in the family to choose which tape we were going to listen to next. And often my dad would let me choose his turn because he knew I'd pick something that he liked too. So also my dad is a musician, so he plays guitar, and he had an electric guitar when I was growing up, and he'd be up in the attic playing a really, really loud electric guitar that would kind of cover the whole village, really. And then the young boys would want to come and learn the guitar off my dad because they could hear it from around the corner. And I used to go and sit and just watch him play. And, yeah. So I'm going to talk about music and how important it is to me. So I was really into music as a teenager, as many teenagers are, and as a young woman. But when I started to meditate, I kind of stopped listening to music as much. And I think that was quite an important part of learning how to meditate and learning how I wanted to live my life, because I think I just used to have music on all the time, or even not music, just something to listen to. So it'd be the radio waking me up, the radio was in the shower, I'd have whatever was on Radio 1 in my head when I was walking to work, and then the radio on the whole time at work as well. So I think it was an important stage in my practice to kind of limit that a little bit so that I could learn a little bit more how to be with what was going on in my mind. Reducing input is something that we talk about quite a lot as a way to help us to become more mindful and become more aware. So I stopped listening to Radio 1, I stopped listening to music as much, and yeah, I think that was just a part of learning how to understand my mind a little bit better and to know what to do with whatever I was thinking about, because the music had become a little bit of a distraction just away from being aware of anything, really. And a really important part of that process was I used to come here for morning meditation, and before the meditation we chant the refuges and precepts, which is a very traditional chant where you're kind of acknowledging your respect for the Buddha and his teachings and the community, the Sangha, and you're also bringing to mind the ethical principles that all Buddhists follow. And I'd find that I'd be walking to work and I'd have the refuges and precepts in my head instead of whatever had been on Radio 1 while I was in the shower. And I remember feeling quite confident in my practice because of that. So that felt like a positive shift. But nevertheless, after a while of not listening to music, I kind of got back into it again, and I found, oh no, this is a real source of energy for me and joy, listening to music quite loudly, maybe dancing about a little bit, discovering new music as well, but mostly listening to music that I know really well, kind of from my childhood, and the lyrics of the songs that I listen to. So yeah, I was glad to kind of get back into listening to music occasionally when I really wanted to engage this kind of energy. And so last year I went on the ordination retreat in Spain, and I was invited to go on that retreat the November before last year. And around that time, it was quite an interesting time because I was feeling very, very inspired in my practice, but I also wasn't sure if I was going to be going on the ordination retreat yet. I hadn't been invited yet, so I was kind of just waiting to find out if I would be going or not, which is quite a significant time. And I started to notice some songs seem more relevant or more important than others. And sometimes I'd just get a song in my head, some lyrics would just pop into my head, and I'd find that song and listen to it and find that it just seemed to be really significant to me at that point in my life. So I started kind of putting these songs together, and I ended up with this compilation tape, CD, that I called my Ordination Bardo compilation. And Bardo is a word it's a Tibetan word that just means kind of space. If you're in a Bardo, you're kind of in a space between one thing and the next, and you're not quite sure where you're going to end up. And it can be quite a rewarding and fruitful time. So yeah, I made this Ordination Bardo compilation, and I listened to it sometimes when I wanted to really kind of connect with the myth of my spiritual life and the myth of ordination, and I found it really, really helpful. You know, if I was just feeling a little bit like, oh, what's going on here, or after I got my invite and I was preparing to go on the retreat, if I needed to just kind of get into a little bit more of a subtle space. I was working really hard at that time because unfortunately the Evolution shop was closing where I used to work. So I just put it on if I needed to be in a kind of subtle, more kind of mythic mood, if I wanted to become a little bit more present to what was happening in my emotions or in my practice. So yeah, the music that I put together and the lyrics of the songs, they kind of led to me being able to understand or express more this ordination myth. And one way of looking at the spiritual path is something called the 5 stages of the spiritual life, which is what we did the theme before this theme. So I'm just going to recap that a little bit, because when I was looking at this compilation and listening to it and thinking about this talk, I noticed that quite when I wanted to talk about particular songs, I realised that a lot of those songs kind of fitted into this way of seeing the spiritual path. So there's 5 stages. There's a kind of traditional list, and then there's a more one that's a little bit easier to maybe understand by the words themselves, which Bodhinaga put together. So there's integration, positive emotion, spiritual death, spiritual rebirth, and then receptivity. And Bodhinaga, who teaches here, has rephrased these as becoming an individual, becoming a connected individual, letting go of being a limited individual, and becoming more than an individual. And receptivity is kind of in there somewhere. And these stages are not necessarily linear. You don't kind of go through integration and then become more positive, but they can one can kind of allow for the other stage to arise. So if you become more integrated, you understand yourself a little bit better. You've got more of a sense of all the different parts of you and where they all want to go, your horse and your rider and all of that Bodhinaga was saying. And once, if we can understand ourselves a bit more, we may find that we become more positive, we may find that we can open up more into love. So yeah, they can be kind of cumulative in that way, but they can also just be going on all together all the time. So I'm just going to read some of the lyrics out of these songs from my Ordination Bardo compilation to show how they kind of fit in with that scheme of the spiritual life. So integration or becoming an individual, I've got this song that's it's a bit like an 80s electronica song. It's modern, but it kind of sounds a bit 80s, and it just says, "You have proved to be a real human being and a real hero." So I like those lyrics. It's kind of feeling quite confident in being a human and all that entails, all of the joys and suffering that being a human being entails. And then moving into positive emotion or becoming a connected individual, so wanting to understand how to love more, or how to understand that you're not just on your own, you're not a fixed and separate individual. This is a song by a band called Love from the late 60s. "You know that I could be in love with almost everyone. I think that people are the greatest fun." Might not work so well without the kind of melody, but I won't do the singing. But now I can talk about singing a bit. And then another one that's in this kind of stage as well, which is a little bit more, I think, showing how we can move into experiencing compassion. So, for you sing, touch me not, come back tomorrow. Oh my heart, shies from the sorrow. That's by Tim Buckley. So again, that's kind of, it can be hard to connect with the more painful experiences that we have or that our friends have, but that lyric kind of helps me to acknowledge that my heart can shy from sorrow, but that I want to turn towards it, and I want to turn towards those I know who are suffering. So spiritual death and spiritual rebirth, so letting go of your limited individual, being a limited individual and becoming more than an individual. I'm putting those two together because actually once you're letting go, it's quite, that once the space opens up, you start to move into being something a little bit different. So the river empties to the tide, fall into the ocean. That's an R.E.M. lyric. And I listened to this album just before I was invited onto the ordination retreat, and it really touched something when I heard that album, and I really wanted to talk to my friend who I thought might be going on the ordination retreat with me, because it just really evoked the whole album. It really evoked this kind of moving towards something significant in my life. And when I was away on the ordination retreat, it felt like the whole retreat was a little bit like a river, and that moving into the ocean would be moving into life in the order, life here in Sheffield, where everything is going on in our on the retreat. It's a little bit more secluded, so coming into the ocean, coming into being connected and responding. And another one by Kate Bush, who is one of my heroines, who was actually the first person to ever have a mic attached to a thing. I'd just like to say that, so that she could sing and dance at the same time. It wasn't Madonna, it was Kate Bush. Also the youngest ever singer-songwriter, female singer-songwriter to get to number 1, so impressive. I am falling like a stone, like a storm, being born again into the sweet morning fog. Do you know what? I love you better now. And I love this song, and I think it is really, it really indicates how if you start to let go of something, let go of being limited, you can love more, because you're kind of letting go of anything that you're clinging to, and you can connect more with other people. And vice versa, if you can love more, then you're more likely to be able to let go of things that are keeping you stuck or habitual. And then receptivity. So I was also finding that as I moved more towards committing to my spiritual life and in a way committing to changing, I could find that what my habitual habits that would normally pull me back would sometimes get a bit louder and try and kind of really get in the way of whatever change might be kind of symbolised by my commitment. So in a way, as the greater my commitment became, the more I might doubt what I was doing, and I had to really hold that in this Bardo space. So this lyric kind of evokes that for me. In these demon days, it's so cold inside, so hard for a good soul to survive. Pick yourself up, it's a brand new day, so turn yourself round, don't burn yourself, turn yourself around into the sun. And that's by Gorillas, but the people singing that are a community gospel choir, so it's really very, very energetic. And the sun is a metaphor for the Buddha, a metaphor for his teachings. So again, it was very helpful to hear that lyric and to, if I was experiencing doubt, to just know that I wanted to turn towards the sun. So that's just little sneak peeks of my ordination Bardo contemplation. I made copies to give to all my friends and family. That was part of the motivation, was so that other people in my life could know a little bit about what was going on for me by listening to that CD. And quite a lot of my friends and family did listen to it while I was away on a 3-month retreat, and they said they did find it useful as a way to kind of bear me in mind and feel connected a little bit to what I was doing. And it's not high art, I'm not claiming that it is, but yet listening to those lyrics and the music that they're put to really did stir my energy and help me to connect more with the myth of the spiritual life that I was living. In a less cognitive way as well, in a kind of less conscious way. It was just I just found it very, very helpful. And it was fun to listen to it. I might dance around a little bit. And it was also quite embedded in the culture that I've grown up in and the life that I've lived, because a lot of these songs I've been listening to since I was a small child. So, yeah. When I was on the ordination retreat, I kept a list of any songs that were coming up in my mind, any lyrics, and I made that into a playlist when I got back as well. And listening to that, it is a bit like a kind of life story. There's songs on that soundtrack that I used to find painful to listen to because they reminded me of painful times in my life. But since that retreat, I kind of want to listen to them, and I think, again, that shows that there's been some kind of integration of that time, because it's not something that I want to push away anymore. So yeah, that's music, and that's why it's important to me in my ordination Bardo compilation. How long have I got, actually? Not very long. Oh, okay. Well, I was going to talk about YouTube, because YouTube's something that I really am happy exists, because it's a way of accessing a lot of music and a lot of interesting information. But it's also something I have difficulty with, because I can become quite addicted to it. I can spend like hours at a time watching videos on YouTube on my phone. So I'd just like to say that that's important, because there's been times when I've watched videos on YouTube and felt really energised, and I had to, well, it was just an important time when I realised I didn't have to feel undermined by doing that, because I felt a little bit like, oh, that's just karma chanda, that's something I should just let go of doing. It's meaningless. But actually it was really helpful to see that it's okay, it was okay for me to express energy or contact energy through watching music on YouTube. There wasn't anything kind of inherently unskillful about that. Yet spending hours on YouTube late at night could have unskillful consequences. There's an unskillful state of mind involved in there, and there could be unskillful consequences if I'm not connected to people the next day, because I'm just kind of glazed over. But what I found really helpful with that is talking to my friends about it. So I just wanted to say that if there's anything that is a little bit more like karma chanda that's going on for me that I'm not quite sure about, if I can just talk to my friends about it, and then I can move towards friendship, I can move towards greater awareness, and that's been really, really important for me recently. And I just, one more lyric that was on the compilation that I made while I was on the ordination retreat, which I think indicates the importance of talking to your friends about something that's going on for you that you're not quite sure about, especially if it's something you're quite private about. So I really like to tell people that I spent 3 hours on YouTube from 12 o'clock till 3 o'clock in the morning. That's not something I want to admit to, and it can be really, really painful if I have been doing that, but it's helpful to do it. So this is a lyric from The Grateful Dead. When the secrets are all told, then the petals all unfold.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about 2 or 3 different things. I'll say how much time is left, and Satyajoti taken away with me when I'm running out of time, starting to run out.
It's going to work for
10 minutes, yeah, thank you. Great. So I was going to talk hopefully about the areas of what makes me want to practice the Dharma, what cultivates Dharma Chanda in me, what makes me want to practice. I also want to talk a bit about what stirs my deeper energy, what kind of connects me with my depths and my deeper energies. And then hopefully a bit about how do I work with Karma Chanda as well, how do I work with when my energy goes in a more habitual kind of sense-pleasure direction. So yeah, so I was saying earlier, we tend to do what we want to do basically, we're kind of creatures of desire, we find ourselves doing what we want to do. So a really important question for me and for a lot of practicing Buddhists will be, how can we really want to practice the Dharma more and more? Because if we really want it more, our energy will become available for it. If we really want to do something, our energy becomes available for that. So what makes me want to lead a more ethical life or a wiser life or more compassionate life? What is it that gets me more inspired to practice the Dharma? I think probably the most important thing is actually joy and pleasure that I get from the Dharma life. It's kind of quite a selfish response, but in a sense, we like pleasure. We like positive experiences, and if we can get that from the Dharma life, which is full of it, then the more we can realise that, focus on that, the more of a pleasure it becomes, the more of a joy it becomes, the more I want to practice the Dharma actually. It takes time, but so if I reflect on my own progress, my own growth, the kind of transformation that's taken place since I came along to the Buddhist Centre, if I reflect on the transformation that's taken place in my friends' lives and seeing how they've really changed, that inspires me. It makes me want to practice the Dharma more. If I can reflect on how my life's changed and how my friendships have become more intimate, more deeper, there's much more joy and happiness in my life, then it really enthuses me. I want to practice the Dharma. There's a phrase from Sangharakshita, who's the founder of our movement, and what he says is that the Dharma isn't taught, the Dharma is caught. And I think that's really true in my experience, that what makes me, I catch the kind of inspiration, the enthusiasm for wanting to practice the Dharma from other people usually. So Friday was a really great example of just going to the welcome back evening for the new order members and hearing, just seeing what a great space they were in, what inspired space they were in, how confident they were in the teachings of the Buddha and the Dharma. Just kind of filled me with inspiration actually. It really reconnected me with my own inspiration. It kind of, Vidanya's got an image of how we try and create a fire as a Sangha, and we each of us try and kind of set each other ablaze more, to burn more brightly. And there's times when we're a bit kind of damp and got a bit soggy, and then other people in the Sangha just dry us out and catch us ablaze again. It was a bit like that on Friday. I wasn't especially damp or soggy, but I just kind of really caught alive again. The kind of fire really kind of caught alive again on Friday. And also, last Tuesday I met up with Dave for a coffee, and Dave was really on fire. Dave was really inspired, and I don't know if he realised that he was, but I thought that he was. It really kind of set me inspired. So the Dharma is caught, not taught. So that, the Dharma Chanda for me really comes from other people. I rely on other people, who are my friends and the Sangha. But also just reflecting on the fruits of Karma Chanda as well. If I over time, I've been doing this for 12 years now as a Buddhist, but I've been probably doing this for lifetimes, the same kind of habitual patterns. I'm starting to bring more and more awareness to what happens if I do the same thing that I've always done. Where does it lead me to? What is the outcome? And it's taken a long time, but I'm starting to realise more and more, actually, that's not that good for me, is it? It's not that beneficial. A lot of my habits just create suffering. They create suffering for me and other people. So just bringing awareness again and again, time and again, to our habitual distractions, the way our energy could flow towards distraction and sense pleasure. If you bring more and more awareness of that and reflect on the consequences, it's a real motivation not to do it, actually. So, over time, what I've found is, you gain momentum. If we talk about having different strands to our being, it's like you can think of carving out different grooves for your energy to flow down. And over time, what I've experienced is that it's easier for my energy to kind of go back into a kind of dharmic groove, because it's been built up, there's momentum being built up over time, more and more momentum being built up over time. So I want to encourage you to say, well, over time, your practice really does accumulate, it really does have an effect. So the second part I want to address is, what we're talking about, how to stir our depths. What is it that gets our deeper energies, which can be a bit blocked, a bit awake, a bit sleepy? How to awaken that, how to get that utilised, how to harness that for our Dharma practice. And a couple of things I want to mention briefly, because I don't have too much time. But one is puja and mantra is the first thing for me that I find. In terms of Buddhist practice, a collective ritual and chanting mantras just seems to kind of plug something. It's like plugging a cable, like a plug into a cable into like some plug socket in my depths that just goes and it's going to stir something up or charges or energizes something in me. So something comes alive, which is just deeply satisfying. And I can't name it really, or kind of, but just something which, let's call it depth or deeper energy. Something gets stirred up and awakened through Buddhist ritual, particularly through mantras for me. Another thing that does this kind of connected area is the mythic and or the whole mythic and archetypal aspect of Buddhism. For me, just hugely important. Buddhism is full of kind of colourful figures, archetypal figures, and there's myths, parables that the Buddhism uses. And it communicates the same truths that we address intellectually, but it communicates them in the language that our deeper energies understand, and it gets them interested and engaged. So for me, there's this whole area of Buddhist mythology, Buddhist archetypal figures, really, again, plugs me into something very vital, very satisfying, deeply satisfying. So, yeah, and there's a whole particular mythology and an archetype around the Naga in Buddhism. It's partly how I came to have the name Bodhinaga, because I just became fascinated by the image of the Naga, which is a dragon or serpent in Buddhist mythology, who is it's a source of huge energy and often seen as a protector of treasure or protector of wisdom. But sometimes, the Nagas can be troublesome and difficult as well. For me, it's a really good mythical way of talking about my deeper energy. My deeper energy, there's a lot of power behind it. Sometimes it's a bit scary and a bit troublesome. Other times it can really be used in service of the Dharma. So for me, anything to do with dragons and Nagas seems to get my interest. It seems to get this kind of deeper energy going. Myths, puja, mantras. So I think when you're hearing these talks, it's important to think, okay, well, that's what works for Moksatara, that's what works for Bodhinaga, for Maitridasa, but it's about you finding what is your own equivalent, what for you communicates to your depths, what speaks the language of the depths for you personally. And there's a whole range of things that you could try. But I want to talk next about, that's all very well and good. We could be inspired, we can want to practice the Dharma, we can catch it, we can give it to other people can catch it from us. There's also times when we are a bit damp and soggy, we're kind of not that inspired, when the Dharma doesn't feel that alive in us. And we have a sense we know what we ought to do. Maybe this is where we're split, like the intellect and the emotions. We know what we ought to do, what would be good for us. We don't really want to do it. We don't want to do it. And I found myself a bit like that in this space. A couple of weeks ago, I was on a retreat or a meeting, a Mitchell-Convener's meeting at Padmaloka, which is an amazing space, full of archetypes, full of myth, full of amazing images and rituals. I was taking part in amazing rituals, chanting mantras. But I was a bit disconnected from my depths. It wasn't working. I was sitting there just not getting the usual benefits from it. And there's various reasons. I was quite a lot in my head. I had a lot going on in my life. I was doing quite a lot of work. I just kind of was really disconnected from my deeper energies. So, if the horse and the rider, if the intellect and emotions have become a bit disconnected, if you aren't connected to your depths, it's important to find out what works for you, what gets energy going, what gets you in a space where you feel energized, and then you can re-engage with Dharma practice. For me, it felt like a bit like a spring that had dried up. There just wasn't energy there. I felt flat rather than being alive and energized. So I want to talk about just 3 examples, just give 3 personal examples of things that work for me to get energy going, to get me connected and energized. The first one is chopping wood. So if sometimes I'm a bit blocked and feeling, particularly if there's like anger that I don't want to connect with, what I've discovered is that if I go and smash up some wood, I feel a lot better. So basically, it might not sound that Buddhist, but actually it's a really skillful use for me of that energy which could otherwise be expressed as anger or as hatred or come out and leak out in other ways. Actually what I found is if I'm just a bit blocked and kind of disconnected with myself. There were some trees cut down recently that were diseased, and we've got a whole pile of wood that needed chopping up. And I remember walking back with Simon and Tansel and Jason were smashing up logs with an axe. And I thought, can I have a go? And I just had a go, and all of a sudden I just felt completely different. All this energy was available. I felt really pleased, really happy, just full of enthusiasm. So you might try chopping logs. That works really in a particular space. The other thing that really works is I have a weekly singing lesson with Sangha Gita. I've not booked in this week, so I'll have to see with the team. But what I've been doing for probably getting on for 6 months now is having a singing lesson. And like Moksatara, music used to be a really important part of my life. And also like Moksatara, I kind of moved away from it thinking it was kind of a holy thing, it's a spiritual thing to do to somehow move away from it, which was a real mistake. And more recently I've been looking at just using my voice as an instrument, getting back in touch with music that way. What I found is that as well as spending a lovely time with Sangha Gita, which is great and very encouraging, I also really connect with myself emotionally through that. I find I can't really sing if I'm not in touch with what's going on for me emotionally. So if I'm sad or angry, I can only really sing well if I'm in touch with that emotion that's there in the background. It's great for body awareness as well because we do a whole series of warm-ups that really gets me grounded and in my body. And it's great fun, I really enjoy singing the songs. And also I found folk music seems to come into a similar kind of category as kind of myths and kind of archetype. It seems to inhabit a similar kind of space for me in terms of my energy. So I really love learning and singing folk songs with Sangha Gita. And I always leave that lesson, sometimes I arrive feeling a bit resistant, a bit blocked. And I always leave just feeling really happy, full of energy, enthused and ready to kind of take on the day. So for me that's a great way of just kind of getting blocked energy available and to kind of become energised. And then finally, what I discovered worked last week at Padmaloka was I realised I needed something to do with dragons. So I talked earlier about nagas and dragons, but I've also discovered if I read a novel that's a fantasy novel to do with dragons, wizards, magic, it kind of starts to get my imagination stirred up. It kind of starts to put me closer to the kind of space where I can access myth and archetype and ritual. So I went into the community library at Padmaloka, and they've got a huge, vast collection of really different books. And I found a copy of The Hobbit, so I started to read The Hobbit whilst I was at Padmaloka. And it's very accessible, and it just took me back into more of a kind of mythic, imaginative space where there was wizards, there was dragons, there was magic, there was dwarves and orcs, all kind of stuff. And it just put me back into space. And all of a sudden my dream life came alive. I started to have really vivid dreams, which is a good sign for me. I was very happy, lots of energy, and puja came alive, mantra came alive, meditation started to come alive. So, to summarise, basically, it's really important to get your energy involved in your Dharma practice. If you feel kind of blocked, flat, meditation feels a bit flat, feels a bit dry, a bit hard work, what do you enjoy and how can you use that? How can you find pleasure and get energy going? How can you use that to make energy available for Dharma practice? How can you combine the two, like Moksatara was talking about, with music and musical lyrics? Because if there's emotional weight behind it, then more of you will be involved, more energy will be involved. Yes, that's all I have to say.
So continuing the singing theme. Dittava yeva ditta ye cha dureva santi avidure bhuttava sambhave siva sabbe satta bhavantu sukhitata. Which means, whatever living beings there are, whether seen or unseen, whether near or far, whether born or yet to be born, may they all be happy in their heart of hearts. So this is a verse from the Karaniya Metta Sutta, which is the Buddha teaching about the practice of metta. And I try to chant the Karaniya Metta Sutta every day. It works for me better to chant it in Pali than to sort of say it in English. And the reason I do that is it reminds me of my ordination. So at the time of ordination, I was given my name, which is Maitridasa, which means servant of love, servant of metta. And when I was given that name by my preceptor Padmavajra, I really felt fully seen for the first time in my life. So it's as if he was saying, that is who you are. That is who you really could be. That is who you really are when you're at your best. So for me, remembering my name through chanting this mantra is really important because it connects me with that clear, deep sense of purpose I had that was activated by my ordination. So we all arrived here at the centre with probably largely worldly concerns. We probably had largely followed the paths that society had laid down for us. And we probably reached some point where we realised this isn't working properly. I keep getting stuck, I'm not really fulfilled, I keep going around in circles, some version of that. So if we didn't have Dhammacanda, we probably wouldn't be here. Because we were looking for something more true, more helpful, more beneficial, something that works. And that looking, that searching is Dhammacanda. So when Pamavajra gave me the name Maitridasa, he gave me some advice and he said, whatever emotional response you're having in any situation, put it at the service of metta. So make an effort to come back to the foundation of metta. So in the last few weeks, there have been a couple of situations where Pamavajra's words have come back to me. And where recollecting my ordination and my name has really helped. So I came back from India a month ago. And a year ago probably. And when I got back, I found out that my sister-in-law, who I really care about, was in the final days of battling with cancer. And I was very lucky because of the generosity of my colleagues at the centre. I was able to spend quite a lot of time with her in her last few weeks. And it was a really precious time because any blockages there might have been, any differences, any resentments that I was carrying just dissolved in that time. And I started to appreciate fully what she meant to me, what she'd given me, how much she loved me, and how much I loved her. And I was able to tell her that, which was the most important thing. You know, saying I love you to someone and really meaning it is very rare in life. But occasionally there's moments when the whole of you is behind that statement. All of you is giving that love, and all of that love is received by that person. So about 2 weeks ago, so I was in St Luke's Hospice, and at the moment of my sister-in-law Jeanette's death. It was just me and her, which was an incredibly strong experience. And this incredible peace came over her at that moment, and she relaxed and she seemed happy. And what it felt like being there was that something had opened up for her. She'd seen what lay ahead, and she was happy about that. And that's what it felt like to me. And there was something about me being there, so whatever the mystery is that is afterlife, it touched me deeply as well, because somehow I became close to it. So traditionally in Buddhism, reflection on death is a really important practice. The reason people reflect on death is not to make themselves sad, but to increase their dhammacanda, to increase their urgency about living. So when we really see that death is an inevitable part of life, when we really see that we've got no control about the time of our death, and when we really see that at the time of death, it's only the Dharma that's going to be any use to us, those three things, that really strengthens our desire to practice right here and now, wholeheartedly. When else will the right time be? So reflecting on the truth of impermanence, reflecting on the inevitability that we will be parted from those that we love, reflecting on the truth that this pain is just an integral part of being an aware human being. All of these reflections can shake us out of our complacency and connect us with what it is we really want to be doing with our lives. And of course, these aren't easy reflections. They unsettle us, they shake us up, they can make us feel sad. And we're not always emotionally positive enough, robust enough to reflect in that way. So if we're feeling a bit fragile or down or low in self-confidence, then reflecting in this way can just be too much, actually. But when we do find ourselves in good conditions with positive, spacious states of mind, for example, if we're on a retreat, it can be really, really beneficial to reflect as deeply as possible on impermanence in order to strengthen our Dharma chanda. Now, of course, sometimes we have no option but to see the inevitability of death. Sometimes it just stares us in the face and rocks us to our core. At those times, we don't actually need to reflect on death. It's as if we're just living it. So, seeing Jeanette die really shook me up. I've been quite shaken up in the last 2 weeks. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You know, when we care about people, of course we are affected when they suffer. But yeah, again, Pamavajra's words come to my mind. It's like, well, what choice do we have actually? You know, we have to keep loving, we have to keep caring, we have to keep doing the metta bhavana. You can never actually get to the end of the metta bhavana. You know, when will we find people who don't want to be free from suffering? And we can never really love enough because we'll never get to the end of suffering. It will just keep coming. So yeah, there's no choice really but just to keep trying. To keep softening the barriers between ourselves and others. To keep identifying more and more with others and not so much with our own selfish concerns. And it's like an unresolvable tension. So the Buddha himself, after his enlightenment, he was said to look out on the suffering of humanity, of all living beings. And his response was that he trembled. Okay, the word used is trembled, often translated as compassion, but the actual word is trembled. So that's to say he was deeply affected. He was deeply moved. He was stirred. Of course, his consciousness was vast enough, positive enough to bear that tension. Mine isn't. So I've had a long-standing connection over many, many years with a project in India, working with children. I lived there for 5 years. And through that time, I got very close to over 100 children. Became like a substitute uncle to some of them, a substitute father to some of them. So, yeah, over that time, developed attachments to quite a lot of young people. So, 3 years ago, one was murdered. 1 year ago, one was killed in a road accident. 2 weeks ago, one of them phoned me up and told me he was on the run from the police. So, a lot of heartache, a lot of anguish, a lot of worry. Do I wish that I'd never got involved with those young people? No. Can I stop caring for them? No. Do I wish to learn to love more effectively and more wisely? Definitely yes. Do I aspire to love less exclusively? Definitely yes. But stopping loving, stopping caring, stopping developing metta isn't an option. So, yeah, Dharma chanda, it's not only about moving forwards, it's not only about moving towards the truth. Sometimes we just need it to stand still, to stand firm, to withstand the storms. Dharma chanda is what allows us to be battered by the storms of life, but not defeated. And when that's happening, loving ourselves, looking after ourselves, being patient with ourselves, having tenderness to ourselves is absolutely vital. You know, if we allow ourselves to become despondent and broken, that doesn't serve anyone. It doesn't serve ourselves, it doesn't serve anyone. So there will be times when we just have to put others' concerns and demands aside for a while and just give ourselves the time we need to recover and open up to the kindness of our friends. And when we do that, then our inner steel, our inner strength, our sense of purpose and determination will naturally resurface when the time is right. And I think the last day or two, probably because of the two events that have been mentioned, the Welcome Back ceremony and Dharma Day, I really started to remember that ultimately it's only the Dharma that will get to the root of the distress that I've been feeling. It can take a whole lifetime to become fully convinced of that. You know, it's the Dharma that I have to keep turning to. It's the Dharma that I have to keep going for refuge to. The Dharma is the truth, and that's why it works. So in a way, the real condition for Dharma Chanda is the Dharma itself. The Dharma is what works, and that's why I desire it. And that's why I'm drawn to it. So Dharma Chanda is not just about me cultivating a desire. It's also about the Dharma itself drawing me to it. That's what it feels like. So in difficult times, it's important to try and find some perspective that expresses Dharma. Some verse of Dharma, or something wise that a friend has said to you, that you can really keep in your heart. Something that helps you to remember what your life is about, what's most important to you. Yeah, so in this short talk, I've basically been talking about the power of remembering. Remembering times when we really saw how we want to live our lives very clearly. Remembering the stark fact of impermanence and suffering, and remembering to turn towards the Dharma. So I'll finish with some more Dharma, with another verse from the Karaniya Metta Sutta, which for me is a reminder to me of what's most important. It's the Karaniya Metta Sutta, metta itself, it's a radically different perspective that has the strength to cut through all the knots of self-centeredness that I get tangled up in. Here we go. Mata yathani putang ayusa ekaputang anurake evam pi sabba bhutesu manasam bhavaye aparimanam. Which means, just as a mother fiercely loves and protects her child, her only child, even until her last breath, one should develop a mind of love that is like that, but towards all living beings.